Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our virtual CTDW Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded. I'm very excited today to have Dana Smith with us. Dana is a Cultural Proficiency Consultant and therefore has tons and tons of great knowledge to help us navigate the DEI landscape. So Dana, it's all yours, my friend.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I see some hands waving and making a little bit of noise and all that kind of stuff. So I can see most, but obviously I can't see all. I'll open it up so I have a few more people in the vision here. Okay, all right, all right. I'm really excited about being here. I've been looking very forward to having this conversation. Again, as Michael said, I come with a host of experience. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. My experience, it spans over 3 decades now, and I've done anti-bias, what they used to call diversity work, and now they refer to as diversity, equity, and inclusion work all across this country. As a matter of fact, in 40 of the 50 states and 2 or 3 different countries abroad. This is truly my life's work, and I like to know people who I have the luxury of speaking with and engaging these particular topics to know that I don't run in a phone booth and change clothes into a fire person or a classroom teacher or a chef. This is what I do, and this is truly who I am. I really believe I was born to do this work. I enjoy it a lot. It comes with its own set of challenges, as you might imagine. But thank you for taking time out to be with me today. And thank you for your leadership who made this all happen. Now, I noticed some people don't have their video. We'll talk about that in terms of some of the agreements we'll come up with. But since you know a little bit about me, my chat function is working. So what I'd like to ask you to do is to let me know what your favorite food stuff is. As a matter of fact, I'm going to narrow it down to something sweet. This is what I could have, and I could have it whenever I wanted to, and it was something sweet. Please log in on the chat. Let me know. You don't have to put your name, and I'll see it come up anyway. But go to the chat and tell me what that something is, okay? Tell us all what that something is, all right? What's your favorite sweet thing to eat, all right? Key lime pie. Oh my goodness. I know a place in New York that makes a key lime pie that, woo, my. Snickers, I got you. Okay. Strawberry cheesecake. Got it. Reese's peanut butter cups. That was my favorite as a child. You see these gray hairs on my chinny chin. I can't pass as a kid anymore. Take 5 candy bars. Chocolate cake with chocolate frosting. All right, okay, all right. We got some few more people who haven't chimed in. Come on, wake up, get busy with it, okay? Some things we all gonna have to do, and this is one of those things, all right? Pound cake. Never had a better one than the ones that are homemade, though. Ice cream. I guess that would be all 25 flavors, Michael, I guess, right? Because you don't only tell me ice cream and know what I'd show up with if I didn't. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right. Rocky Road. There you go. There you go. Vanilla. Yes. That's what my brother would go into Baskin Robbins and get vanilla ice cream. I said, we might as well go to Kroger's and pick that up, right? But he said there was something about Baskin Robbins. Okay. Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? Going twice. Susan, did I hear one from you? Susan, did you give me a sweet stuff? I didn't see yours pass through. There we go. Yeah, them peanut butter. Oh, yes. Baklava, Greek pastry, honey, nuts. Oh, you thought I didn't know what that was, didn't you? Oh, okay, dokie then. Yes. Oh, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. everything and any, thank you all. Let me first thank you all for those responses, and we will get back to chat from time to time because in a large part, that's going to be the mode of our interaction. But also I'd like you to unmute occasionally, and so I can also hear your voice like you hear mine. One of the things that is incumbent upon improving an environment, whether it's the place where you work or the place where you live, is the quality of the relationships. And when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, relationships are enhanced by the nature of the information that we exchange. Sometimes we don't have significant conversations with people who we're just uncomfortable being around. We tend to talk about everything that's nothing and nothing that's everything. Weather's okay, we can talk tennis, we can talk this, but real information, we tend not to share that. And that can really hamper our ability to have quality relationships and treat people as fair as everybody would like to be treated, okay? Have you been to a, what they used to call diversity, now diversity, equity, and inclusion workshop setting before? We could just raise a hand, you know, we got reactions that say yes or yeah, there we go. Thanks, Jim, I appreciate that. Yeah, let's raise a hand if you've been, okay? Now, I've mentioned doing this work all across the country. I used to work for a consulting firm, and that's what their life's work was, diversity work. Seldom did I have the luxury of going into an organization where people were looking forward to me showing up, me or whoever the other consultant was, to have this diversity conversation. As a matter of fact, how many volunteers do you think we get when we'd have one of those sessions? Because sometimes they were voluntary. How many do you think? 1, 5, 10? Everybody running up? What do you think? Somebody put it in the chat. How many volunteers do you think? Anybody? Everybody, 4, maybe get 4, okay. Now, we did work with organizations like the size of Colgate-Palmolive and Mellon Bank and Monsanto Chemical Company, Shearson Lehman. This is the magnitude of our clientele list. So we did some very, Coca-Cola, as a matter of fact, was one of our clients. 4, okay, all right. Rarely did we get volunteers. So after a short amount of time, the organizations that had to do the work of diversity had to mandate. Folks did not voluntarily come to have this conversation. And I'm talking about folks of all background, ilks, kinds, all right? Some people would be uncomfortable. Some people would just simply be afraid. Do you think people today, 20 and 21, are more willing to come up to a voluntary workshop meeting around the issue of diversity and inclusion versus 20 years ago? Somebody unmute themselves and tell me your response. Do you think they're more willing to volunteer for one of these conversations today versus 20 years ago? Someone unmute yourself and share that with me, with us. Uh-oh, was that Michael speaking?
Yes, that was me trying to speak post by another participant. But I would say that folks are more inclined to speak out at diversity meetings because it's being emphasized and talked about a lot more, and therefore people are more willing to come forward and have discussions about it because everyone recognized the importance of it. I assume that's why we're having this meeting today and why it's become such a major part of most organizations, government, as well as businesses as well.
Thank you, Michael. Can I hear from someone else in terms of your perspective as to whether or not you think, feel, or believe people are more willing to volunteer for a session of this nature today versus 20 years ago? Someone unmute yourself other than Mike. Thank you, Michael, by the way.
I think that particularly in light of the events of the last year, particularly, I think people should and are more willing and able to discuss diversity issues. And I hope that's true.
Okay. And are you, Holly, referencing any particular event that may
Well,
have?
of course, you know, the George Floyd and
Yes.
Black Lives Matter, I believe, would be a much contributing factor in people's willingness to discuss diversity issues that they may not have been aware existed.
Thank you very much, Holly. I hope you don't mind me asking the follow-up question, because clarity is important. There's been a lot of issues. That was an incredibly huge one as it pertains to particularly these issues. So thank you for that. We got time for one more. Can we hear one more person, please? What do you think? More inclined today versus 20 years ago to sit and have this conversation. Can we squeeze one more person in there, please? I saw someone raise their hand, or maybe.
I think that companies today are finding it, especially large corporations, and hopefully some of the smaller companies are finding it very important to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in their organizations based on things that we've been seeing on the news. We want our employees to feel like they're supported. We want them to feel comfortable in their workplace. We want everyone to know that in my company, we want everyone to know that their opinions are valued, no matter where they come from.
Yes, thank you very much. Oh, I really appreciate all three of you speaking out. I think it has changed to some degree. I still encounter many groups that are reticent to speak out and speak plainly around their attitudes, other people's issues, and even sometimes things that they experience. But there has been a growth of inclusionary workshops in certain areas of our country. And I appreciate that, because I, for one, definitely know the serious, the important, and the critical nature of having relationships across these cultural, gender, backgrounds, and identities in terms of being effective at whatever you do. I could care less what it is. I think some people still yet don't have a sense of urgency in terms of how important these issues are and how they may very well impact them personally. I think for a large part, people think this is a quote unquote minority oppressed group issue. It actually involves everyone. And before we finish our 3-session topics, I'll get into some of those ways in which this issue affects everybody that's in the meeting, okay? I don't care what you do, however you do it, all right? Are there any questions that you have for me? Anything at all, big, medium, or small? You can stop me at any point in time. You can put something in the chat. You can raise a hand and I'll respond to that, okay? All right, I'm going to start sharing my screen here, and we are going to go through just a few parts of a PowerPoint presentation that I have, okay? Okay. Okay, there we go. Can everybody see that okay? May not see it? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let me slide my little screen off here so it could covering up my slide. Put that over a little bit. Okay, a conversation. I am very fond of saying and understanding that change in the area of appreciation and acceptance of people from various backgrounds under the same roof starts with a conversation. We are not close to where we need to be in terms of having that conversation in broad enough arenas, especially conversations that are had based on doing the work that's required to improve those environments before something happens. Most of the arenas that I have gone into, something has occurred. Somebody has said something, somebody has done something, something in the media has kicked it off or something. We've not felt it necessary or critical enough just to have that conversation in-house in a proactive versus a reactive nature. So I put that little tennis ball up there because, again, in large part, that's what my experience has been going across the country and having these conversations. A lot of the folks in the room, not all, we're not very happy about it, okay? So A few agreements. I would really ask that everybody participate. Keep your video on, if at all possible. We don't mind the interruption of kids or dogs or animals or phone ringing or all that kind. I'm okay with all of that. You can eat and do all that. It's really better when we're able to see as many people as we possibly can. Another one in terms of agreements I like to have is that I ask each and every one of you to speak your truth. Not what you think someone else thinks, not what you think I want to hear, not what you think might be most agreeable to management or whoever runs your particular arena in your area. But share your truth, speak your truth. We all collectively want to make it okay for you to do that. I know sometimes it's very dangerous to do that in particular environments. There's still places across this country where you can be automatically dismissed because of who you love. Now, when I tell people that, they say, no, Dana, no, listen, you can be let go. If you tell somebody, this is who I love, this is who I'm engaged to, you can be fired on the spot, no repercussion, you can't sue or anything. Still happens. So I can understand some people of certain backgrounds being reticent to actually speak their entire truth. I hope it's okay in here in our sessions that we're able to make it comfortable and safe enough for everybody to do that. And then share the air. I know some of us can be more vocal than others. I do want to hear people. I want to hear people's voices. I want to hear folks speak, but please be mindful not to monopolize the time when you do open up a voice, okay? I hope those agreements are all okay. I have no power, no agency whatsoever to enforce them. I'm just asking you all be considerate and abide by them, all right? 3 words. We're going to manage several words in terms of a presentation so that we'll have some baseline understanding that'll lead us to a place where we can actually have an inclusive, common understanding of having a conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The first one is prejudice, and it's made up of 2 words, pre, which is before, and judging, so you prejudge. They always say that you can't read a book simply by looking at what? Somebody unmute themselves and give me that word. You can't read a book by looking at what?
The cover.
The cover. Thank you very much, Cindy. I appreciate that. Yeah, just by the cover. You think you can, but no, we can't. The same way with people. I had no way of knowing that someone was going to say vanilla ice cream. I would have guessed that might have been a cheesecake person. I have no way of knowing that. So until we actually exchange that information, you really don't know who people are. Now, there's certain aspects of you and me that stick out to say, okay, that's one of those, that's one of those, that's who they are, or, hey, drives that, does that. But beyond that, we really don't have the particulars. The other one is stereotyping. There are a lot of stereotypes that are very healthy and well. Will someone please share with me just one stereotype that they have ever heard? Remember, I'm not asking you one that you said. I want you to share with me one that you have heard before. Anybody, unmute yourself and do that for me.
Women are bad drivers.
Women are bad drivers. Thank you very much. I've heard that in passing as well. Someone else, please.
People with glasses are smart.
Yes, absolutely. And people believe that, oh boy, what do you know? Oh, sure. A high profile politician changed to glasses because of some of the incredible faux pas that he made when speaking. And he started wearing glasses because he thought, well, now maybe they'll overlook. All right, with stereotypes. The industry that some of us may or may not be aware of where the term stereotype comes from is actually the printing industry. Stereotype was a type back in the day when we used typesetting for our written information. Typesetting is putting the letters in a certain way to print a word on a piece of paper. That's what typesetting is. So I don't care if you put a black piece of paper, a white piece of paper, an orange piece of paper, or a pink piece of paper under that typesetting. You know what you're going to get? You're going to get the same thing. And you can do it as many times as you want to. If you don't change the typeset, you're going to get the same thing. So that's where the term stereotype comes from. I've always find that to be a very interesting and an intriguing and very little known aspect of what that word really means. That means doing the same thing over and over and over again and getting the same outcome over and over again. So that's what's expected. And the last but not least is discrimination. Now, discrimination unlike prejudice and stereotype, is actually an act. Is actually an act. Okay. Now I've got a hand raised by John up there. Was that just a hello in terms of stereotype for John?
So, sorry, that was the hello from the beginning. I should
Hi,
take that
John.
down.
Okay. Okay. I still see it up there. And Tina, what about yours? Is that, I don't know, your hand's still up there too?
No, I was just waving. I don't know how to make it go away.
Hi. That's all right. Just click it again and it'll go away. If you go down there and
Oh.
hit it again, it'll disappear.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you for waving as well. But again, discrimination is an act. Unlike prejudice and stereotype, it's an actual act. There's still rampant discrimination that occurs. And again, I can say that. What I like to do is when I have the luxury of spending quality time with individuals, so I can show you, because I can show you better than I can tell you. I can show you many indices where discrimination is very real. One of the ones that particularly pains me, and there are many, is the pay inequity for a woman versus a man in corporate America. It's still very real. I constantly counsel young adults, female young adults, when you go into corporate America, you are really able and licensed to ask if there is pay equity. Because if the employer lies to you and says there is and there isn't, you got an automatic lawsuit that you'll automatically win. Okay. Women are still being paid sometimes 75, 78 cents to $1 that a man doing the same responsibilities. That needs to change. That has to change through action and advocacy. All right. Bias, peanut butter and what? What should be there? Peanut butter and what?
Jelly.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Do you like your jelly with the lumps with the peanut, with the nuts in it, or you like that smooth kind?
Nuts.
Smooth.
You like the nut? I like the bumpy road.
Depending on the mood.
Both. Yes, I like. Yes, they like both. Okay, mix it up. One scrambled egg and one over easy. I got that. Peanut butter and bias. Absolutely. See, it's so commonplace that someone knows, and so many of us knows what should have been there. Okay, peanut butter and jelly. I put peanut butter and bias because a major part of having this conversation is the understanding and the appreciation of what bias is, but also where it comes from. Okay, do you as an individual have bias? I'm speaking to the audience now. Do you? You can raise a hand, you can unmute, say yes, no, whatever. You have bias? I'm listening. I heard somebody. You can raise a hand.
Everybody has some type of bias.
Everybody, not me. I'm the speaker. Hold up, wait a minute. Back that little train up. Not me. Me, Jenna, me? No, I'm not buying that. I'm not, no. Now, I might have bias toward green peas.
You may have unconscious bias.
I couldn't rule out that possibility. Now that I couldn't rule out that possibility without a doubt. So where did I get it? Because you know what? I wasn't born with it. And I'll cop, yes, I do have some bias. And I have some particular bias that are geared toward particular people in the groups that they belong to and what they look like, where they come from, how they dress, what they talk like. Where did I get that? Where did I get that bias? Anybody?
It could be a learned behavior. I can share my personal experience in regards to unconscious bias that I probably didn't even realize I had.
Please.
Over 20 years ago, this is when I had my first diversity conversation with my manager. And I was in recruiting and I was hiring a call center class. And she came to me one day and I was young in my 20s, maybe early mid 20s back then. And she said, Sonia, there's a lot of you in that training room. And I didn't realize what she meant. Now, she could have had that diversity conversation a little better. But what she meant was I hired all young Black women that looked like me. And I didn't even really think about it that way. But that was my first diversity lesson. Wow. So that was interesting.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for sharing that really excellent personal example of how that bias can affect us. Yes, without a doubt, without a doubt. Anybody have a kind of loose definition for bias? Go ahead, I'm sorry. I had somebody else speaking.
Well, I am originally from Ghana, and when I first got to the US, I played soccer, and so I was invited to a basketball game. Apparently, they found out that I was the first Black person who couldn't play basketball, and so that was some type of unconscious bias about people that all Black men can play basketball.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you for that. Absolutely. And again, they can be medium, mild, or most damaging, but we have all kind of biases.
Yes,
but someone chimed in there and responded when I asked the question where they come from in terms of them being learned. So a lot of the work that I do is how do we unlearn our biases? Folks, they never go away. They never go away. But what's wonderful is given an effective intervention in a process and a conversation with some actions that you can take, you can manage them. Having biases does not make us bad people, doesn't make us evil, doesn't make us racist, doesn't make us sexist, doesn't make us homophobic, okay? It makes us biased, and we're all biased, but we've all been taught bias. No one is born thinking this way or that way about any individual person, kind, color, creed, nature, period. So it's coming from somewhere. They're coming from the media and other kind of tributaries, and it seriously gets in. It's so effective that we all have it, but unfortunately, many of us have not gone to a place where we know how we are able to manage it. So then we allow our biases to manage us, and when I look in the room, everybody I've hired is looking like me. Oops. So if I was aware of my bias, that wouldn't have happened. That most likely wouldn't have happened, okay? So peanut butter and bias. Take a look at this triangle. Can everybody see that? I'm sorry, this picture, I call it triangle because I'm gonna ask you about the triangles. Anybody not see it? Michael, you see that okay? It's coming across on your screen? Okay. So I just want you to count and you just put it in the chat in terms of how many triangles, count them all now that you see, all right? Count them up, just put the number in the chat so I can see, all right? Count them all now. Mm-hmm. Okay. 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 I think I saw an 8. Does anybody see more than 8? Unmute your voice so we can hear that voice. Anybody see more than 8? No?
Yes.
Yes, how many?
Yes.
11.
Okay, anybody more than 11? Okay. Yeah. Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, gone. Okay. Maybe I can twist a few arms back at that executive level of your organization and get a gift card or something, but what's the actual number? Someone unmute yourself and tell me what that number is. I hear someone in the background, but they're not coming through. What's that number? Huh? Did you unmute yourself?
I thought it was 8.
I'm sorry, would you repeat?
Yeah.
I can hardly hear you. You're vaguely.
8.
8, okay. I think I have most 8 responses. I didn't count all, but I probably have more 8 responses, but there's a 4 in there. There's 11 in there. There's a, okay. Anybody else? Going once, going twice?
1.
1. Somebody, okay, there we go. Here we go. Somebody sees just one. Somebody else? Okay.
It's definitely 11.
Definitely allowed. Wait, look, we're not. Look, I hope you're in separate buildings because I can't like mediate skirmishes either. So 11, you stay in your room. 8, you stay over there, and then 1, you stay back in the yard. All right. You know, this can get contentious. Actually, there's 0. Don't believe that, right? There are no triangles. And why are there no triangles in that picture? Can someone unmute yourself and tell me, why are there no triangles? Absolute 0.
An illusion.
Because the lines aren't complete.
Thank you, Kay. The lines are complete. So where'd the lines come from, Kay?
It was an optical assumption that we made when we saw that. We created those in our minds.
Okay, okay, okay. All right, okay. Thank you very much. And remember when I made that agreement around speaking your truth? If that's what you did, own it. Go ahead. Yeah, there are no lines. The lines aren't complete. Triangle has to have 3 sides, right? There's nothing in there with 3 sides on it, folks. I'm sorry. We, and I like hers, an optical assumption, never heard it said that way, but we completed the triangle. We filled in the gaps. And folks, that's what our minds do. That's what our minds do when it comes to a particular kind of bias. Before I open my mouth, you think I can play basketball. See? Yeah, absolutely. Before I open my mouth, you believe that I live here. Before I say anything or do anything, you think I was not the valedictorian of my high school. No way. You fill in the gaps. You fill in the gaps with biased information that you have been taught about an individual for whatever reason represents what you see in this person before you. And we do it all the time. It's a shortcut way of processing in terms of how our brain works, fueled by prejudice and stereotypes, okay? So my screen didn't, sure, I'm trying to go to my next slide here and it's not moving. Bear with me here, I'm gonna. There we go. Definition for bias: an inclination or preference either for or against an individual or group that interferes with impartial judgment. This is your textbook Funkin Wagner Webster's definition of bias. For me, as an experienced facilitator and intervening on these issues of diversity, now called diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think the term inclination should be also affixed to something that says feeling. So I'd say an inclination, feeling, or preference, either for or against an individual or group that interferes with impartial judgment. So that's bias. That's how it works, okay? And that word at the top, it actually says bias. Yeah, yeah. Some people read from left to right. Some people read from right to left. So that's actually what that word says. It says bias, at least to me anyway. Now let's talk about implicit bias, okay? I have a video here and it's only very short, so I'd like you to take a look-see and hear what's said. I apologize for the representation of political figures. There is one not siding any way or the other, but the person just exists because they really made this word kind of popular when they mentioned it.
Yes. Implicit biases are basically thought processes that happen without you even knowing it. Little mental shortcuts that hold judgments you might not agree with. And sometimes the shortcuts are based on race. First, some clarity. Saying someone has an implicit bias is different from calling someone a racist.
The word racist is a highly loaded term, right, here in American society. A lot of times, when people are using it, they're thinking of the kind of old-fashioned Ku Klux Klan style racist.
But implicit bias isn't anywhere near that, explicit.
Implicit bias is something that comes out of ordinary mental functioning, out of how the mind normally works.
We've all grown up in a culture with media images, news images, conversations we heard at home, our education. Think of that as a fog we've been breathing our whole life. We never even realized it, what we were taking in.
And that fog causes associations that lead to biases.
I somehow know that if you say peanut butter, I'm going to say jelly. That's an association that's been ingrained in me because throughout my life, peanut butter and jelly are together. And in many forms of media, there's an overrepresentation of Black men and violent crime being paired together.
And because of that, I actually deep down inside have been taught that Black men are violent and aggressive and not to be trusted, that they're criminals, that they're thugs.
With all those associations, I'm not trying to let us off the hook, but in some ways, none of us stood a chance.
Starting today, we'll post a video a day dealing with one challenge of understanding implicit bias and its relationship to race and exploring ways we might combat the problem.
One more thing, if you're seeing this and thinking that it doesn't apply to you, well, you might be falling prey to the blind spot bias. That's the scientific name for a mental bias that allows you to see biases in others, but not in yourself. We're biased.
Thank you for viewing that video. It's one of the more effective ones that I've come across in my experience of doing this work and explaining that connection around how implicit bias works. Now, I'm even going to reiterate that we were not born with people bias. Everybody in this group and any other group that we'll ever interact with that has those people biases, and that's everyone, we're taught these biases. In that video, the narrator made a comment. It's sort of like being in an area with contaminated air and you're breathing this fog and you don't even realize it. That no longer pertains today. We well know where biases come from, how they're conveyed, and their pejorative impact that they have on individuals' functioning, inclusion, welcoming, and fair treatment. The question is, why is there not more being done about it? It's not a surprise, folks, that people feel, sense, and have ingested these particular people-based biases. And I can answer that question because some biases really harm some people and some biases really benefit some people. So some people are really in a better place around biases staying exactly the way they are, okay? We don't have to point fingers or anything like that, but we are under an umbrella where if we believe in a value system that everybody should be treated fairly, and that's not the same now, fairly, we should be doing a lot more to combat bias that we've been taught. If you're actually working against some of the biases that you have ingested over your lifespan, it's sort of like waking up and walking the wrong direction on an automatic walkway. You know the kind they have in some of the larger airports, you just step and it takes you away? So that's how it is when we wake up with our biases. You just step into and it just takes you away because it's there. So how do I walk against that grain? What do I do to fight these biases that I know, one, are unjust and irrational, and for the most part, they're probably harmful, although all biases aren't harmful. So what do I do? How do I do it? How do I challenge those particular biases? Before we finish these three-part series, I'll share with some of those how-tos, if you're willing, in terms of how you might address some of the biases. I will tell you that the very first step is acknowledging that we all have them and not really feeling bad about it. I don't need that kind of emotion to be associated. I know that I've been taught this. I moved to Connecticut from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is my home, to live with an aunt after I was out of college. And one of the first things that she taught me in the span of, I'd say, 10 hours was prejudice against Puerto Rican people. We took a ride in the community, and if there were more than 4 people in a car, there was a car full of Puerto Ricans. If there was a house painted some kind of bright colors. Puerto Ricans live there. If there was a downturn kind of community, that's a Puerto Rican. And I didn't know what a Puerto Rican was when I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay, I was clueless. But she ingested this fog upon me. Now that I thought that every time this must be. And again, I was a young man, didn't know any better. But I know how quickly biases can be impacted by a person who has them toward another person. When we get these calls of things that happen with our youth inside of some of our schools, they say immediately that they did not learn that at home. This is the parents, the caretakers. So I said, have you had a conversation about bias and prejudice? No, we don't talk about that at home. So if you're not having the conversation, you're leaving yourself and your loved ones open to ingest any kind of smog that's out there. And again, we know what the smog is. We know where it comes from. So we got to have the conversations and create a comfortable environment so we can have those conversations if we're able to combat these biases that we've taught. And I call it Unlearning Conversations, which is a whole nother series that I do, okay? Any questions at all about bias? Anybody? Okay, I'm trying to forward my slide here. For some reason, I got to hit it a few times. Let me try it this way. Okay. Okay, that worked last time, didn't work this way. Bear with me. Trying to screen share.
You know, you can hit escape and go back.
Yeah, escape?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I tried. Okay. I tried that and it's still. So I'm going to the screen share and try. And thank you for that suggestion, by the way. I hit escape and okay, there we go. No, now it's all good. Okay. Screen sharing is stopped. Windows is closed. Okay. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. Two types of bias. Implicit bias, and that's bias that we are unaware of. Involuntary and unintentional. That's that bias that we had the wonderful person, and I forget your name, I apologize, when you had that first lesson about bias and hiring people who reflected what you look like. So we have these implicit biases. We're unaware, didn't realize I had that stuff, but it's going on. And then there's the explicit bias. There's blatant things, the pejorative name calling, the targeting, the exclusion, the discrimination that is blatant and real and very intentional. That's explicit bias. That's also very real in our experiences and in our culture today. But they are two different forms, IB and EB. I call it implicit bias and explicit bias. Now, this other word that we have to wrestle with today is something called microaggressions. Microaggressions, and I'll just read the definition out loud to everybody. It's a subtle but offensive. Everybody can see that on the screen?
No.
No? Oh, I'm sorry.
I sent you a text.
I'm sorry. Let me.
You need to share it again. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe. Hold on. I'm just chatting away and Now, can you see it?
Yes. Please.
There you go. There you go. Okay. All right. I'm sorry about that. Microaggressions is the other words that we were and want to address before our time runs out today. A subtle but offensive comment or action directed at a member of a marginalized group, a special racial minority that is often unintentionally offensive or unconsciously reinforces a stereotype. Now I'm going to turn it over to any volunteer in the group to share with me what they think or they know might be a microaggression if it's said to someone. Anybody, unmute yourself, would you please? What might? I see someone's lips moving, but I don't hear you. Anybody? Microaggression? No one? Would you raise your hand, because I can see most of you here, if you've heard the term before, microaggression? I got a hand. Got a hand. No, Robert says never heard that. Okay, thank you for the hand. All right, Holly, about you? You never heard that word before? You have? You have heard? Okay, okay, okay. Again, this is why this first part that we do, like the other parts, is so important, because we have to focus in on this conversation and what's included today in 2021. And this is one of the terms that is really included. It's a put down. Someone sometimes called it a veiled slight made toward a, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Hi there. Hi, this is John. You know, I have an example here, and I'm not sure if it's a microaggression, but let me just tell you what it is.
Please, John, thank you.
I had gone to a colleague's house, and I was admiring some of the carpets that they had in the house.
The carpets on the floor.
Yes,
Okay.
Carpets on the floor. And you know, when I was young, I always knew these carpets as Oriental rugs.
Oh.
And I had made a comment that I really liked a particular Oriental rug that was in the room, and that was, I guess, offensive.
Yeah.
So, you know, so this is one of the things I've seen a lot of people struggle with is, you know, there are words that are now no longer okay that used to be fine years ago. And, you know, how do we all, you know, come to terms with, and, you know, another thing that happens these days are the pronouns, you know, he, him, she, her. You know, there is a very large learning curve, I think, for a lot of people, especially, you know, people that, you know, aren't millennials, that, you know, are older. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you for sharing. First, did that comment on your behalf lead to a bigger conversation in terms of why that was offensive in some regard, that term Oriental, or did you get kicked out of the house and they tell you don't ever come back anymore? How did it work?
No. I mean, it was just kind of glossed over pretty quickly. And it wasn't even, the older person in the house had no problem with it. It was a younger person in the home that, you know, thought it was inappropriate.
Yeah. Yes. I really, oh my, I'm just ecstatic based on your example and a few others that you have shared as an audience. I really appreciate that. This is what pushes this conversation in a direction of learning and not accusation or punishment. So first, let me say there's no place called Orient, right? So there's no person that can be Oriental. And it was a blanket term that was used toward people who were deemed to be of the Asiatic community, okay? Really nondescript. And then over time, it really became painful. You know, it never was okay. What happened over time was voices got stronger, voices got more courageous to say, I don't like to be referred to that way. Much like Negro did in the African-American community. don't want that anyway. Now I want to name myself. So this is who I am. This is the group I belong to. And it's not Oriental. Okay. But I like the fact that one willing to serve it up that it happened to you. But what I most like to happen is a bigger discussion in terms of why was that offended? And that's how microaggression comes off also. So it was an excellent example because people make these comments and oftentimes they're intended to be put ups and not put downs, but that's not how they're received. That's not how they're received at all. Let me give you a couple.
Yeah, I would just say just one other thing along. This is David. So one other thing along the lines of what this is David.
Okay, David, go ahead.
So what along the lines of what John was saying. So it's interesting how unfortunately my perception I'm more concerned now, and maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but I guess before when I saw somebody, I'd like to think that if they didn't look like me, it didn't really matter. I just treated them like another person.
Yeah.
And it was just another person, what race, ethnicity, whatever, didn't matter. And now I find myself on guard to a certain extent when I come across somebody that isn't, because I'm afraid I'm going to do something kind of like what John says, like, okay, I gotta now really think about what I'm saying, because a word I say could possibly come across as offensive when it really wasn't meant to be offensive. So I guess to me, from a societal perspective, it's sad that I can't think of everybody the same now because I have to be so on guard on what I'm saying. But yet, I don't know, maybe that's a good thing in the short term. It's just, I don't like that because of the fact that now I can't just think of a person as another person. I've got to think about, oh God, I got to make sure I don't say something that could potentially be offensive. And it's hard to know what all those things are nowadays, to be quite honest.
Thank you. And thank you very much for that. I call that the walking on eggshells impact of being more effective in our communication cross-culturally. You feel like there's some trepidation, there's some danger, there's some possible exposure of myself, my biases, my ignorance. And ignorance for me is a term of not knowing. It's not has anything to do with anybody's intellectual capacity. So we're all ignorant. There's all some things that we don't know. But I could expose myself of saying some things. Again, when we have the quality relationships across those cultural boundaries, it's much less apt to be punished or treated in a discouraging kind of a way because I've made a slip of the lip. One of the ones I sometimes bring groups' attention to is this thing people call rule of the thumb. I don't know how many of you've heard it, but it's still far too common in our nomenclature. The rule of thumb is, in other words, the standard to go about it. The rule of thumb comes from the history of when a man, and I'm using terms as they were inclusive then, had the license to beat his significant other, who happened to be female at that time, with a stick no wider than the width of his thumb. That's what rule of thumb came from, okay? Very harmful, very, very painful reminiscence of terms of what that means. And people still use it casually. They still use it casually. So we know we can get better than that. But I don't want people to have to walk around on eggshells. That's why we got to have these conversations so we can learn more. Any of us are apt to make a slip of the lip or say something that it didn't intend to be offensive that absolutely was. So microaggressions come on that way. Some people know that maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I didn't have any other way of saying it. Some other ones I hear from sometimes is you throw like what? Unmute yourself. And what does the people say? You throw like what?
A girl. A girl.
Oh, there we go. You throw like a girl. Where are you from? Really? Where are you really from? In other words, you can't be from East Los Angeles. Ain't no way. No. Yeah. Who does that? In terms of something you might have as your cultural norm that doesn't fit anybody else. Who does that? Are you adopted? You don't talk like, and again, I have the arrows because you fill in the blanks and they come over and over and over and repeatedly. One of the things that me and my experience as a cultural proficiency consultant have a problem with actually is the terminology of microaggression. Micro means small. There's nothing small about these slights that happen repeatedly over and over again. As a matter of fact, this characterization in this slide in terms of a bee sting is how it is. So many bee stings actually poison you to death. But some people think just get thick skin, take it. But people have to tread through these time and time again. I don't see color, you name it. They're just out there. We can get better than this. And we can also acknowledge what the microaggressions are so we can kind of address their usage inside of our own environments and our own climates. All right. Any questions at all from anybody about microaggressions? Thank you ever so much about the carpet, the analogy. That really fit. That made that explanation easier and better for me. Now, this last word is equity. Some people toss this around outside of context as well and not quite understanding the difference between equity and equality. So if you meet two people on the street and you are an English speaker, it's the only language you speak. And the two people, one speaks Spanish and that's the only language he or she speaks, and the other one speaks English like you do and that's the only language they speak. They both need directions, they both lost. You deliver directions in English, which is the only language you know.
Well, where's the rest? Yeah.
So you have actually treated two people the same or otherwise equally, but you've not treated them fairly. That's the difference between equality and equity. Equity is treating a person in a way that they are included, they are appreciated, and they are accepted. That equity may be different for different people, depending on what their needs, their interests, and their proclivities are. So one size does not fit all. And that's what's demonstrated in the boxes here. You see the folks trying to look, I couldn't find a better demonstration than this one here. That's equality. You gave everybody the same thing, but it's not working for some people, right? That's between that and equity, right? Last, the climate. The climate is the prevailing attitude, standards, and environmental conditions of a group, period, or place. We'll delve a little bit more into climate and what creates an inclusive, fair, welcoming, and all-important safe environment at the place that you work. Actually works at the place where you live too. But we'll talk about what needs to be said, what needs to be done, and trying to move forward and create a climate of that nature. Okay? All right. Last but not least, second serve. Hit that first one, hit into the net. We had a first serve at this thing called diversity, equity, and inclusion. We used to call it something else. Hadn't worked out so well. Folks, we're on our second serve. Let's make it a winner. Let's make it better. Let's do the work required and put forth the sense of urgency that says we can be better than this because we know we can. But it's going to take work. It doesn't happen by osmosis like rain falling from the sky. Okay? That's it. That's it. That's Dana. That's done. I can't thank you enough for abiding by those agreements. As a matter of fact, you've surpassed them. You've been very attentive. Thank you for taking a risk. And remember, what we share together stays here. Okay? And I want to hear outside of this group about the carpet example or the person who hired people. Let's keep it here. Okay? Let's keep it between us as we move through these 3-session series. All right? Thank you for being here. And I think I'll see you again on the 14th of this month, same time, same channel. All right?
Actually,
thank you very much.
We'll see you on the 21st. Today's the 14th.
I mean, the 21st. I'm sorry. You see, I'm skipping a that's right. That's why you're here.
Thank you, Dana. Great first session. Gave us a lot to think about. And as Dana said, we'll see everyone next Wednesday, the 21st at noon. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.